Hello everyone, welcome to the fourth episode of the series in which we are trying to code Guess the Number game in various programming languages. In this episode we are going to code the game in Ruby. This is the Wikipedia page for Ruby. Ruby is an interpreted high-level general-purpose programming language. Many of you have probably heard of Ruby on Rails, which is a framework built on top of Ruby. It says here that Ruby is an interpreted language. Interpreted language, for those of you who don't know, is a language that does not require code to be compiled to machine language in order to be executed. Language basically has an interpreter that executes the instruction directly without the need to compile it. We don't try to go too deep into the details of the programming language in this series, so I'll just stop at that. And we're going to jump to coding now. As always, I'm going to start by copying these steps from the repository and switch to my editor. As you can see, I've already created this guessthenumber.rb file, Ruby files end in .rb extension. I'm going to paste the code that I copied from the repository and comment it out. In Ruby, you can comment a line by using the pound sign. Anything after the pound sign gets commented. However, if you want to comment more than one line, you can also use block comment. In order to use block comment, you can begin your comment block by typing equals begin. This will begin the comment, and you can end the comment by using equals end. And whatever you put in between will be commented out. And whatever you put after the end obviously will not be commented out. Now that we have the steps copied over and commented out, let's start with step 1. Generate a random number between 1 and 100 inclusive. Let's create a random number variable. In order to generate a random number in Ruby, you can use rand function and give it a max value. In this case, I'm passing 100 for the max value. So this will generate a random number between 0 and 99. The maximum bound is not included in that random number. So if I want a random number between 1 and 100, I can simply just add 1 to this. This will generate a random number between 0 and 99, and we're going to add 1 to that. So the end result is a random number between 1 and 100. Let's print this random number to make sure our code is working. In order to print something in Ruby, you can use puts method and give it the thing that you want to print. In our case, we're just going to print the random number. Let's run this and see if we get a random number. We did get a random number, 5, and it is between 1 and 100. Let's run it again, 97, one more time. 46, as you can see, the number changes every time, but still within 1 and 100. So our code is working. I'm going to put this put statement here for testing purpose. Let's move on to step 2. Set the number of guesses to 0. We're going to create attempts variable and set it to 0. Step 3, print I'm thinking of a number between 1 and 100. As you already know, you can use puts to print stuff into the screen. So I'm going to use puts I am thinking of a number between 1 and 100. Step 4, print take a guess. Puts take a guess. Step 5, read in the user's guess. We are going to create a guess variable, and in order to read user's input in Ruby, you can use gets method. It kind of makes sense. If you want to print something, you say puts, and if you want to get the user's input, you say gets. However, gets returns a string and not a number. So if I try to print the class of this guess after I get the guess from the user, it'll show us that it's a string. So I'm going to enter 50 for the guess, and as you can see, this line printed this string. So guess is a string because gets returns a string. But we want our guess to be a number, an integer to be precise. So you can use 2i to convert this gets, that is the user's input, to a number or an integer. So if I run this again, after we put our input and print the class of this guess, we should see integer. I'm going to run it again. I'm going to guess 50, and as you can see, this line printed integer. So guess is now an integer because we did this 2i. With that, we're done with step 5. Step 6, increment the number of guesses. Since the user just guessed, we're going to increase the attempts by 1. We can also do attempts plus equals 1. This will do the same thing as attempts equals attempts plus 1. Step 7. If the user's guess is correct, print you guessed it. The number was X, and also print you guessed it in Y attempts. So if guess is equal to random number, then we are going to print puts you guessed it. The number was random number. If you run this now, you're going to see that it's going to complain. I'm going to guess 77 so that we get inside this if statement. And it complained. No implicit conversion of integer into string. Random number is an integer, and we're trying to append it to this string using the plus sign, and the plus sign expects second value to be the same type as the first value. This is a string, so it expects this to be a string, but in our case it's a number, integer to be precise, hence it's complaining. You might also have noticed that the program did not blow up right away. We were still able to run it, we were able to generate the random number, print some stuff, get the input, and then it's only when it reached this point that it blew up. It is because Ruby is an interpreted language. In a lot of other languages, if I had this code, it would have blown up at compile time. It wouldn't even run. But since Ruby is an interpreted language, the interpreter basically interpreted this line, generated the random number, interpreted that line, printed the random number, interpreted this line, and kept on going until it reached this line and tried to interpret it and run it, but then it didn't because this is not a valid code. So we need to fix that, and we can do that very easily. Similar to this 2i method that converts a string to an integer, there's also a 2s method that converts a number to string. So if we run it now, I'll take a guess of 77. It ran. You guessed it, the number was random number to string, 2s. So it worked. It didn't error out this time. Another thing that you might have noticed is that my guess is being typed in the next line. I would prefer it to be typed in the same line because I have that colon and I intend to type my guess on the same line. We can change that by changing this puts to print. Puts adds a new line to the end of whatever you tell it to print. It moves the cursor to the next line, however, print does not. So if I run it now, I should be able to guess in the same line as the prompt. As you can see, I'm able to guess on the same line as the prompt. However, I had a space in here. I wanted a space between take a guess colon and my actual guess, but for some reason looks like my editor is doing something funky. So I am going to run the program using PowerShell and using Ruby command. Let's see. Here, as you can see, when I type my guess, there is a space between take a guess colon and my guess, and this is what I wanted. So I am gonna, moving forward, use command line to run it. So with that, we're done with the first part of 7. There's also another part. We need to print the number of attempts. We're gonna print, you guessed it, in Y attempts. So puts, you guessed it, in attempts.2s plus attempts. Okay. Step 8. If the user's guess is too low, print your guess is too low. For this, we're going to use else if here. In Ruby, you can do else if by using else if, but without an E here. Kind of weird that they just decided to omit an E here, but it is what it is. This is else if. Guess is less than random number. We are going to print your guess is too low. Else, which is the case where the guess is too high, and that's step 9, we are going to print your guess is too high. And step 10, if the user's guess is incorrect, print take a guess again. If guess is not equal to random number, print take a guess again. Here actually we want to use print instead of puts because we don't want a new line at the end. We want to be able to type our guess on the same line. So let's try running this. I'm going to use PowerShell again because editor is having some issues. I'm thinking of a number between 1 and 100. I'm going to guess 50. And your guess is too low, and it also printed take a guess again because it wasn't correct. Let's run it again. 50, and your guess is too high. Take a guess again because it's not equal. 75. I'm going to guess 75 this time so it's equal. And it says you guessed it, the number was 75. You guessed it in 1 attempt, and it did not print take a guess again because we don't need to guess again. Let's move on to step 11. Repeat from step 5 to 10 until the user's guess is correct. So we're going to repeat all of this and put it in while true loop. And we need to break out of this loop when the user guesses the number correctly. Otherwise, it'll just keep on asking for guesses even when we get it correctly. So in here, we're going to break. So this is it. This is the guess the number game. It should be working. We are printing the random number right now, and we're going to test one round of the game with the random number being printed, and we'll remove it. So let's run it. We know the random number is 48, but let's just pretend that we don't. I'm thinking of a number between 1 and 100. I'm going to guess 50. It's too high. 25. Too low. 35. Too low. 42. Too low. 48. And it was 48. It took me 5 attempts to guess it. So let's remove the code that prints the random number because that's cheating. And there are also a couple other things that we can change here to make the code better. First change is that we don't need this if check here because when the guess is correct, we print you guessed it number was the number that they guessed and you guessed it in a number of attempts and we break out of it. So if we reach this line, that means guess is obviously not equal to the random number, so we don't need to check for it. We can basically remove that. And another thing that we can change is how we are joining these strings together using this plus sign. There's a better way of doing that in Ruby. Ruby supports string interpolation. If you're creating your string using double quote instead of a single quote, you can actually use string interpolation to place the string inside another string. So I could, instead of appending it at the end, place it inside this string by using pound and curly braces. So whatever I put in here will get evaluated and then placed at this place in this string. And I'm going to add a period at the end. We're going to do the same thing here. Instead of using plus, we are going to put this inside pound and curly braces. I mentioned earlier that you can only do this if your string starts with double quotes. In Ruby, you can have strings inside single quotes as well as double quotes. For example, here I am not using string interpolation, so the preferred method to create a string is actually put it inside single quote. However, I am also using a single quote inside the string itself, so in that case you can basically leave it as double quote. Or you can escape that single quote. So if I were to convert this to single quote, since I have another single quote, I can escape it. But I prefer, instead of escaping a single quote, to just have it be a double quote. That way I don't have to escape it. However, for this one, since we don't have any single quote inside and we're not using string interpolation, I can just convert this into a single string, and all of this, as you will see when it runs, is going to work. So with that, we have come to the end of the coding part. Let's run it one more time. I'm going to remove this block comment because we don't need it. Let's test it without the random number being printed and with some of the changes that we made. Let's make sure it's still working. I'm going to run it. As you can see, it did print take a guess even though we changed the double quotes to single quote. I don't know what the random number is, but I'm going to start by guessing 50. It is too high. I'm going to guess 25. It is too high. 12. Too low. 18. Too high. 15. And 15 was the number. And I guessed it in 5 attempts. So there you go. There you have it. This is Guess the Number game written in Ruby. I am going to copy this code and push it to the repository. Right now, as you can see, there is no folder for Ruby here, but by the time this video gets uploaded to YouTube, I will have Ruby folder added here with the code inside it. So this is the repository where I'll be adding the code for all the future languages that I'll be coding the game in. So feel free to bookmark this page or to star the repository. And also, I've created a playlist in YouTube where you can see the videos of all of the coding sessions in this series. So feel free to check that out. And also, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon if you want to be notified anytime I upload a video in this series or any other video of me coding. With that, we have come to the end of this episode. Hope you enjoyed it. I will see you in next video. Goodbye.